So good day, everybody. Welcome to Dario's expert webinar series titled Back to the Office Boot Camp. I'm Carol Nugent. I will be your host today. I'm Vice President of Employer Sales for North America at Dario Health, and I have been hosting our series, our three-part series, which we will continue in a couple of weeks. As we discussed last time, for those that weren't on, throughout these webinars, we really aim to offer perspective, data, insights, and trends, as well as, most importantly, actionable thought leadership that you can take back with you. As you know, the complexity and nuances of return to office has been on everyone's minds, specifically how do we transition employees from home offices, hybrid models, and other unusual working scenarios that we've all run into, like perhaps working from bed, from near the pool, from outside on your deck. And after 18 months of pandemic life, it has become our primary focus. That includes taking into consideration the effects on physical, social, financial, and mental health, as well as the effects of those factors on our employees, families, and their co-workers. Our second webinar today is focused on preparing for a healthy transition back to the office, really focused on the state of musculoskeletal health. Pre-pandemic, musculoskeletal issues were already becoming more of a priority for employers, regularly landing in the top 5 cost drivers for most of them. And then the pandemic happened, and it created a new urgency as people shifted to their home environments, sitting at dining room tables and so on, creating really very real physical issues for so many people. So before I introduce our expert today, let's all take a deep breath. Let's sit back, shoulders back, in honor of our MSK discussion today. And we promise to give you a really constructive back and forth discussion from a tactical perspective, just some administrative issues. Please enter your questions in the chat throughout the discussion, and we will make sure that we address them at the end. We will also follow up and share the recording with everybody who has registered after this as well. Without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce today's expert, Ben Canner. He is the CEO of Worklete. He will be your guide as an early innovator in employee musculoskeletal health and prevention. Ben will get more into this, but Worklete offers advanced technology to prevent workplace injuries using predictive analytics and smart skill building. Ben has years of data-driven insights and perspective to share on the importance of prevention and how employers can prepare to support emerging musculoskeletal needs, but also as early as possible so that we can intervene at someone's very early risk journey. So with that said, I'll turn it over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Carol. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you. And thanks to all of our friends at Dario for having me on today. Yeah, great introduction. Really appreciate it. Today we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about, what we're seeing in the, as people return to work. And then also I want to get into, well, why are we seeing this? What is the basis for all of this stuff? Just to kind of set ourselves all up with a good foundation so we can really have an informed discussion moving forward, and we can really inform ourselves of what do we need to do to keep all of our employees, our coworkers, our team members, our family, happy and healthy. So with that, I'll go ahead and just get right into it. Carol, just to check, did you see my slide change? Great. Okay. So what we're really seeing is that everybody's kind of had an increased focus on musculoskeletal health, during the pandemic. It's become front of mind because a lot of us have experienced it. Maybe we haven't experienced it before and we're experiencing it now. Maybe we're, the leader of a safety part of an organization and we're seeing it. Maybe we're even an executive or a manager in an organization and we're seeing costs associated with it. We're seeing different ways of addressing these problems. A lot of new solutions have come to light in the recent past. And so this has really become front of mind. We see that about 78% of work from home employees say that they've been negatively impacted by COVID, right? Sedentary lifestyle, right? They're in different positions all day long. Maybe they're sitting on the couch and doing work. So these pain and these injuries, some of these lagging indicators for being in poor positions have really come to the forefront of people's minds. People have sought out doctors, again, a lagging indicator. And then, people are even noticing, well, why am I here? I actually am seeing myself be in worse postures, and that's probably driving some of this talk. So let's talk about how we've gotten here and make sure we're kind of all on the same page of, well, why are we experiencing these injuries, and set ourselves up for a good discussion moving forward. First of all, let's talk about ergonomics, right? Everybody's probably heard the term ergonomics. Most people might not even know what it means, but they kind of have an idea, right? So ergonomics is literally the applied science concerned with designing and arranging things people use so that people and things interact most efficiently and safely. In layman's terms, it's engineering the environment to the human being. By virtue of engineering the environment, I can engineer some of the risk out of it. And by virtue of engineering the risk out of it, I can decrease the potential for injury, right? In the office environment, we have a lot of opportunity to do this, right? This guy looks like he's in a flight simulator, okay? So I can do all of these things in this very controlled environment in order to engineer the risk out of it and engineer the potential for injury, right? I'm standing right now, as you might notice, right? I can lift my desk up. I could, if I'm sitting, I can have a great ergonomic chair. I can change the height of my monitor. I can put something under my wrists to mitigate carpal tunnel as I'm typing. I can do all these things. And especially in the office environment, I have a lot of opportunity to do this because it's a very controlled environment, right? So even if I have all of these different types of things, all of a sudden we end up looking like this, right? So I've got all this great engineering, and then I'm not interacting with it correctly, right? I'm slouching over, I'm doing all these different types of things. And then to make matters worse, many of us have not even had that great environment, or we've gone out of our greatly, amazing engineering in our office environment and end up working on a couch or working in bed. And then I'm even in poorer positions. So no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm at a desk or on the couch, everybody starts ending up looking like this, right? And so this is obviously, not optimal. And it's one of the factors that is leading to this increased incidence of musculoskeletal injury, musculoskeletal pain, all these different types of things. We talked about the office environment. We at Worklete focus a lot on frontline workers. We have a lot of office workers that utilize our platform, utilize our software, utilize our programs. But at the same time, the biggest incidence of this stuff and people that are at highest risk are really doing these very physical jobs. Outside of the office environment, we still have a lot of opportunity for engineering, right? There is an infinite number of situations out there. It's not as controlled of environment. So we do have less opportunity for engineering, but at the end of the day, there's still a lot of opportunity, right? If we take a look at this guy, a ramp, right? That's engineering, right? We've got a two-wheeler, a hand cart, that's engineering. It's a tool that I can use to mitigate the risk of lifting these kegs, right? I can have truck handles, things of that sort, all engineering, all ergonomics that we can utilize to keep ourselves safe. With that, though, unfortunately, we can still set ourselves up for injury. So you can see here, this guy is putting his ergonomic or his engineering in place in order to mitigate the risk of lifting. But at the end of the day, just putting that in place is setting him up in a poor position. We can see that shoulder looks terrible right there. So even with that engineering, there is, still opportunity for injury. OSHA did a study. They said all other things being equal, if we just put ergonomics in, how much can we decrease injuries? And what they came up with over, I think it was a 10-year period, a 7-year period, was that if we, all else being equal, if we put in ergonomics, we can decrease the incident of injury by 26%. 26% is great. I'll take it. But what do we do about that other 74%, right? We want to have our journey to zero and really eliminate this incidence of injury as much as possible, right? So 26 is great, but what else can we do beyond ergonomics? What I'm going to talk about is proper movement matters. Really, that's the thing. At the end of the day, I can have the best engineering, the best tools, the best ergonomics in the world. But if I don't interact with it correctly, if I don't use my body correctly, while I'm sitting, while I'm standing, while I'm doing physical work, despite the engineering, I'm going to set myself up for injury and set myself up for pain, right? I need to be able to utilize my body to interact with that engineering correctly to get the most out of it and mitigate the incidence of pain and injury. So employers do a lot of other stuff in the workplace in order to try and mitigate these injuries, right? Before work, they can have ergonomics, right? We can have stretching. And a lot of this stuff, again, is in maybe the frontline industries. We can do a warm up. We can have wellness programs. We can do all these things even before a employee starts work in order to mitigate and hopefully decrease the risk of them actually having an injury. But despite of all of this stuff, we end up seeing people go ahead and do this, right? Oh no. Okay, so that doesn't look good. We've got the old rainbow back going on here. But once that happens, maybe somebody has pain, they have injury. We can do other things in order to mitigate that injury. We can have early intervention programs, right? If they do actually get injured, we can send them to physical therapy. But then a lot of time, and physical therapy is a great thing. Just a second on that. Physical therapy is literally helping people, setting people up to heal properly, right? But a lot of times we don't talk about, well, why did somebody actually get injured? And then we just throw them back into work after they're healed up, and then they go ahead and do this, right? And then they're back to physical therapy. And even worse, maybe they're out of work altogether. They need to get surgery, all these different types of things. So again, proper movement matters. We need to talk about, even if we have all these ways of setting employees up to be healthy over time, we need to talk about, well, actual physical movement. What are you actually doing? And really identify the root cause of why did you get injured in the first place, even if they go to physical therapy, so we can go ahead and actually impact and change that root cause. So they don't go ahead and do the same thing over again. So really at the end of the day, I am what I do all the time, right? If I sit in poor positions at a desk all day long with my shoulders rolled forward and slouching over and my neck up, that's the way I'm going to end up picking things up. That's the way I'm going to end up picking my groceries. I'm the sum total of all the movements that I do. And if I'm not in good habits, when I'm hanging out in positions all day long, a lot of us hang out at a desk all day long, then when I go to do other stuff that might be actually high risk, even if I'm not a frontline worker and my job is not lifting boxes all day long, I'm going to be at a higher risk of injury. So what we need to do is we need to create habits around better movement. So we hang out in these positions all day long. And then when I do other stuff, I'm going to be more likely to be in those stronger positions. Now, just a little note on Worklete. So that's basically what we do all the time. We are basically an automated personal trainer for the front line. Again, we talk about office, we talk about front line, but front line is really at higher risk. And so these are the folks that we focus on a lot more. We use AI, machine learning, all these different types of things in order to help these learners develop preventative habits tailored to their personal needs and risk level in real time, right? We want to make it personalized, the individual, and we want to do it consistently so that this is front of mind for them all the time. And we all have this amazing thing in our hand today and most every day. And this can become very powerful for reminders and helping to build habits. So overall, we've seen that, especially on the front line, the pandemic is creating a tremendous uncertainty for employers. People didn't know what was going on when it started. They saw things probably change a little bit than they thought was going to happen. And really, overall, it's just really created a very uncertain environment for being a large employer very uncertain employment for being a large employer in today. So one of the major things is it's tough to find and retain talent. There's a worker shortage on the front line. We've got a few statistics here about drivers, and there's a driver shortage for the logistics, warehousing, freight distribution space. Construction business as well. There's hard to find people that want to do physical work. At the same time, we're seeing higher volumes and demands on these workers, right? I was lucky enough to move from the city to the suburbs during the pandemic. And now all I do see all day long in my home office is the UPS or the FedEx or the Amazon truck going back and forth. So as our buying patterns have changed, it's actually increased the way that we're purchasing and the volumes of freight that we're seeing out there in the world. It's also becoming more difficult to manage. And I think that this is across the white collar space as well as the blue collar space. But we're seeing that the ratio of managers to employees, along with a high turnover in the workforce, it's one of the frothiest job markets in recent memory, and that's actually creating a lot of turnover in the workplace. So both in the white collar industries as well as the blue collar industries, we're seeing this high turnover. We're seeing the manager to employee ratio actually increase. So there's more employees that a manager has to manage. And with that, it becomes more difficult. So we need some of these advanced solutions out there and at our fingertips today to help these folks do that. So all of these trends, along with just folks being at home, being in these poor positions, being in these poor environments, not having access to those ergonomics, are impacting this focus on musculoskeletal health and impacting the incidence of these musculoskeletal injuries that we're seeing today. So what can I expect? At the end of the day, we don't know, right? Actually, because this is such an unprecedented, and I'll use the word unprecedented, although I think it's been a little bit overplayed at this point in time, we're not quite sure. As people come back to the office, they've developed these bad habits, right? And so what's going to happen? Are they going to come back into this into these better ergonomically engineered office environments, and we're not going to see an increase in MSK injuries? Or have they been in such poor positions that they've been setting themselves up for injury? And so they've got these underlying conditions, they've broken these bad habits, and then they come to the office and it's just a disaster waiting to happen? We're not really sure yet, right? So folks need to be prepared for this, but we really don't know what the outcomes are. And there are ways that we can go ahead and mitigate this stuff. And I'll talk about them in a few seconds so that we can set people up no matter what they're doing. No matter if another, unprecedented event happens, we can set ourselves up so that we can deal with any situation going forward, whether it's just returning to the office, whether it's going back home, God forbid, or whatever the world and society might throw at us. The other big piece to it, and again, I'll just talk a little bit about frontline workers, is frontline workers have been on the sidelines, right? First, they were sidelined because, a lot of folks didn't know what was going to happen last year. And then they stayed on the sidelines a lot of the time. And again, it's very hard for these employees to find work, especially in these frontline industries, because of the Jobs Act, because of things like that. They had disincentives to go back to work. All that being said, just like an athlete, they were no longer continued or conditioned in order to do the hard work that they needed to do, right? Like many of us may not be able to be even conditioned to sit at a desk all day long. Maybe this has actually been a benefit to some of us where we get up and we walk around and we, can do other things during the day as opposed to being, just sedentary at our desk all day long. Anyway, these frontline folks were not conditioned in order to do the work. So as they get thrown back into this, we are seeing a lot of injuries, just like if you were a professional athlete and you didn't practice for whatever sport or didn't condition yourself for your sport, there's going to be a higher incidence of injury if you just throw yourself back into competition. There's also compounding risk, right? I mean, bad habits in terms of, eating, all these different types of things. Bad habits in terms of sitting. I've been sitting on the couch all day long. Loss of good habits. Maybe I had great habits and I no longer have them. I've lost them. And then also, just stress, mental health needs, all these different types of things are compounding all these issues. And so we really just don't know what to expect when people start going back into the office. What we need to do is we need to build these habits, right? And if we can build habits, just good habits that are with us all the time. It doesn't matter what society throws at us. It doesn't matter, God forbid, if there's another pandemic, we all go back home. We're ready for whatever's out there, right? Because we have these good fundamental underlying habits. What we talk about with Worklete all the time is building habits, right? NASA says it takes 30 days to create a habit and just as long to lose it. And really what we're doing is what we want to do is we want to move people through these stages of movement of competence. We apply this to movement. You can apply it to anything, mathematics, whatever it is, but it's basically this learning competence so that we can go from this idea of unconscious incompetence, where I don't even know that I'm doing something wrong, to conscious incompetence, right? I know I'm doing something wrong, but maybe I don't know how to change it, to conscious competence, where I know I'm doing something wrong, I know how to change it, but in order to change it, I need to think about it all the time. And then unconscious competence is really where we want to get to. Again, having those good underlying habits, and I'm just doing the right thing all the time without even having to think about it. And so that's really where we want to get to. Most people in a lot of realms, again, we're specifically talking about movement, about good posture, about all these different types of things. They're somewhere between unconscious incompetence and conscious incompetence, right? They either don't even know they're doing something wrong, right? They're like, well, why am I having back pain? Why are these things happening to me? Or they know they're doing something wrong, but they don't know how to fix it, right? And so we want to get them along this line. We want to both help them understand that they're doing something wrong, but then we also need to educate them. What are they doing wrong? Why is that resulting in pain or discomfort? And then get them to the point of, well, you need to think about doing the right thing. And then hopefully we can, again, build them to the point where they actually have habits so they do the right thing all the time. Let's talk about another example, right? So this whole thing is, the big mystery of runner's knee, right? I've got a lot of folks, both friends, deal with a lot of athletes that are like, and some high-level athletes that are like, hey, I've got runner's knee. I just don't know why this is happening. I just must have bad luck, right? It's the big mystery of runner's knee, right? Why does runner's knee happen? Well, it's not really a big mystery, actually. Most of the time, runner's knee is just because somebody's knee is collapsing in. And it might just be a little bit, but over miles and miles, if that knee collapses in just a little bit, you're going to start to have that pain, start to have that injury, whether it's on the inside or the outside of the knee, whether it's under the kneecap. But that is actually happening due to that knee and just that little break in position happening over miles and miles and miles, right? This could be the result of a collapsed arch. This could be the result of your gluteus maximus not firing correctly, of the muscles around your hips not firing correctly. There could be a lot of underlying issues as a result of this. But first, runner's knee is not a big mystery. It's because your knee is collapsing in. So we've again identified and gone to that idea of conscious incompetence. We know we're doing something wrong, right? And now we need to understand, well, what are we doing wrong? We need to learn, how do we actually impact that so we're no longer feeling that pain or injury, right? We can take the same example of really understanding, well, why am I feeling pain? And put it here, right? And this is something, again, that we're all probably, we probably understand and realize a lot here now in this day and age. But why do I have upper back and neck pain? Well, if I hang out in bad positions all day long and look like this while I'm doing work, then that's really why I'm going to have that upper back and neck pain. So these are not big mysteries, right? We have to get from that idea of unconscious incompetence, right? I might be experiencing pain and I'm like, I don't know why this is happening. We have to understand why that pain is happening. We have to go to that idea of conscious incompetence, and then really learn and not only be, or not only have, not only be understand why this is happening or that this is happening, but why it's happening, right? We need to actually learn how to deal with this and to put ourselves into those healthy habits so we can get to the point where we're just doing the right thing automatically all the time. And that's really where we're going to win. And that's really where we're going to see the best results and really be ready for anything the world might throw at us. So a little bit more on habit creation. It actually takes, and I said 30 days from NASA, and that was actually studies back when they were putting astronauts into space. But, really it takes about 18 to 254 days to create a habit. Human beings learn through repetition. And so what I need to do is I need to do things over and over again, right? That's really how human beings create habits. And then simultaneously, we can talk about a little bit about learning theory. What I really need to do is not go with those passive teaching methods, right? I know, if you're listening to a lecture, like you're listening to me right now, if you're reading audio visual demonstration, things of that sort, you're only going to retain a very small portion of what you're actually hearing. Now, when we get into group discussion, that's a good thing we're going to do in a few minutes here. When we think about practice, when we think about teaching others, that's really where we start to really retain a lot of the learning that we're doing. And, that's where we're going to establish these better, or we're going to be able to establish these longer lasting habits. What we do at Worklete, and where there's a big opportunity here with technology, is helping people along that journey, along that care continuum. What we do is we use dynamic data models for personalization, to assess skills, needs, and risk. So we can take all this information that's out there in the world, right? How are people interacting with technology? How are people interacting with a platform? We can test them. We can test them again. We can take data from potentially a wearable device, right? Things that we have out there all the time that might be giving us some haptic feedback, right? Telling us that we're in bad positions. But how do we take that data, give it to somebody so it's very personalized to the individual? Personalization drives engagement. They're interacting, like we've talked about in this learning theory previously, in different ways. And by virtue of all this information that we're able to take in, we can create this very personalized program to the individual. Keep it front of mind, right? Takes 18 to 254 days to create a habit. Carol probably learns a lot quicker than I do. She's probably around 18. I might be 253. But at the end of the day, we can take all this stuff, we can cater it to the individual, cater it to the different learning needs. And again, not only help folks understand that they're doing something wrong, but understand why they're doing it wrong, and then create better habits. Again, if we're able to do those different things, and we just do that throughout life, right? We do that whether we're at home, sitting at our desk, God forbid, working at a couch, or just lifting our groceries all day long. Again, if we set ourselves up and create these good habits throughout life, then we're going to be able to deal with anything that the world throws at us. Again, whether we're back in working from home, whether we go back into the office, any of these types of things. The last thing we want to talk about is we've been talking a lot about prevention here, right? Prevention is a big component to this. We'd love to stop injuries before they occur. I talked a little bit about, well, hey, if we're not able to stop those injuries before they occur, or somebody already has an injury, right? We need to go to recovery, right? We can go to PT. There's a lot of digital PT out there that's really, really a great innovation in the space. A big problem with physical therapy historically, and I'm a victim, or I'm definitely, in this boat, is people don't do their exercises, right? You have to go to the physical therapy office. They give you exercises, you go home. Again, now we have all this technology around us, so it can help us to do this in our own environments, help us do this in a distributed fashion, and really, make this physical therapy even more impactful, and help people set people up to heal even more. So we can go from prevention to recovery. We can utilize all the technology out there for that, but then we need to also think about maintenance. Again, one of the fallacies of physical therapy is we set people up to heal. We don't talk about why they were actually injured in the first place, right? So we need to move from recovery back into that maintenance mode, back into that habit creation, talk about personally, why did this injury occur? And by virtue of that, what can we do to create better habits so it doesn't occur again? So this is all a very synergistic timeline in the care continuum, right? If we can have all these different components, and one of the beautiful things about technology is that it can talk to each other, right? And so if we can create a program and a solution where all of these different pieces are hit on the care continuum and it becomes a seamless experience for each user going through it, we're going to have those better outcomes. So all in all, what we want to kind of take away from this, and we want folks to think about, is digital MSK is a way to solve these challenges across the care continuum, right? We have all these great tools. We have amazing technology in our hands each and every day. We're utilizing it all the time. We can leverage that to create this seamless experience across the care continuum. And really, at the end of the day, we want to be able to go ahead and change those fundamental underlying behaviors, because if we change those behaviors, then we're going to set people up to be able to deal with any environment, any situation that they come up against. It doesn't really matter if they have those good fundamental underlying habits. And then lastly, if we can create that seamless experience, right? There's, a lot of companies out there, including Dario, that are really hitting those different components of the care continuum. There's a lot of partnerships between these technology providers that are occurring. And so, if employers and managers and folks can put these and create a seamless experience across this care continuum with solutions that impact each point, we're going to have more engagement from the front line. We're going to have more engagement from the employees, from the users, and we're going to have better outcomes. So Carol, with that, I will go ahead and turn it back over to you, and we can talk a little bit.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. That was excellent. And a lot of our listeners are agreeing that was excellent and that the content was great. We do have a few questions coming in for you to get us started, but I will remind everyone else as we go through the discussion, any additional questions you have would be great. So Ben, as we were preparing for this, and even more so today, that slide about conscious and unconscious competence is the one that resonates the most for me, especially because I'm very passionate and Dario's very passionate with our mission to be making the right thing to do, the easy thing to do. And it seems like those two theories sort of go hand in hand. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and how can we help organizations get their employees down that spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, it's just highlighting it, right? We need to get people from that idea of unconscious incompetence. A lot of folks are having pain, having injuries, or they're not yet, but we want to get ahead of it. And we need to make them aware of it, right? So really just awareness campaigns, and whether it's from an HR department, whether it's from a benefits department, whatever it might be, but making them aware that this is something that you're either having pain and this is why, or you're not having pain, but you need to think about this, especially younger employees, folks that have not been, sitting at a computer for a long time. A lot of folks think that they're invincible, think that they're supermen and women. But 10 years from then, if they're sitting like a weirdo all day long, they're going to have problems, right? So first is making folks aware of it, and then giving them access to these types of tools so that they can deal with it. And again, bringing them first to understand what the problem is, and then secondly, giving them the tools so they can really learn and create better habits, so that they get to that final stage of unconscious competence where they're just doing the right thing all the time.
And do you see that narrative change between blue collar and white collar populations? And I think what I'm getting at, and one of the questions we're receiving, is, does the culture within the workplace or the industry of the workplace affect the way you would recommend someone accomplish this?
Absolutely. I mean, it all starts with culture. A lot of the frontline industries say that they want to establish a culture of safety, right? And that means more than just musculoskeletal, right? A lot of folks are dealing with heavy machinery, things of this sort. Safety is a key factor, but they say that they want to establish a culture of safety because if it's part of the culture, if it's just ingrained in what they do, then not only do managers have to be on their employees, or not only does the employee have to raise their hand and, sign up for the benefit or do whatever it is, their coworkers are helping them, right? It's a culture of safety. It becomes it empowers itself. It lives and breathes within the organization, and it perpetuates itself. So, absolutely, culture is a big component to it. And if we can, start to develop that culture of safety as leaders, then it's going to be easier, or it's going to, catch on like wildfire, and it's going to, be self-perpetuating.
Yeah, and I would add that's certainly something that we find helpful as well. And what I mean by that is that we find it extremely helpful to be flexible by employer, but then I think employers also need to be flexible in terms of the solution delivery by employee, because people learn differently, people want to engage differently, and having a solution that allows that pivot and that flexibility is key.
That's right. And that goes back to all that personalization, right? We need to
Exactly.
personalize it to the employee. A lot of programs historically have been, kind of group. We've learned in cohorts. And now, again, we have this amazing technology. We can wear devices on a personal level. So based on all of that stuff, if we can personalize it to the employee, most people are going to be more likely to engage. And by virtue of that, we're going to have those better outcomes.
Exactly. Essentially, you're meeting every buyer in your ecosystem where they are, individuals, employers, vendors, partners, whatever the case may be, and that's ultimately going to drive more success. One of the questions that we received from our attendees, with the great resignation in process, are you seeing employers investing more in environmental safety or workplace enhancements, and that could be on site in the office or at home, in order to demonstrate that commitment to their people?
Yes, we are. And, we've always talked about this, and, I think a lot of folks have given it lip service, but, especially we've actually seen this over the past few years, especially in logistics, warehousing, truck driving mainly. There's a truck driver shortage, and it's not just pandemic, it was pre-pandemic. And, if I'm a truck driver, well, why do I stay at one employer and not just go down the road to the next employer who's going to give me, $1 more per hour, right? And so how do those employers differentiate themselves from the competition for the employees in order so that they can have folks, they can retain those employees better? So yes, we're absolutely seeing that. And programs like this is what people are starting to look to, right? We're showing that we actually care about the employees, and people really respond to that, right? I think that this was, what we've seen over probably the past 20 years is the white collar industry really, and technology specifically really, kind of blaze the trail here, right? We had all of these companies like Google. I mean, all these folks putting in these amazing benefits programs to attract and retain employees. Unfortunately, especially in the blue collar space, they didn't have that, right? And so now these employers are really starting to realize, well, I do need to differentiate myself from the competition, especially because there's an employee shortage out there. So let's look to some of these types of benefit programs, so that we can show that we care about our employees. They want to be here. We're creating a good culture, and it's helping, again, attract and retain those employees.
And you're absolutely right that really started with the white collar, largest and most innovative of the employers in the industry. Attraction and retention became one of their guiding principles. It led to a sense of paternalism across their employee base,
Yeah.
and we've seen them succeed because of that, and having costs be a secondary cost driver to that, and really showing their employees that they not only care about them, but they care about really everybody in their vicinity, has, I think, proven to be extremely successful in the industry. And now with how do we get other employers to be able to bring that same sort of effort to their populations as well?
And at the end of the day, I think, people think, oh, there's additional cost associated with this, but you might not realize how much cost is associated not only with just recruiting a new person if somebody else leaves, but training them, the productivity or the lack of productivity that they're going to have while they're being trained. So I think, I haven't done the analysis, but net, some of these types of programs can probably save money in the long run, even if there is a capital outlay looks like a capital outlay for them.
Yeah, and I think that's hands down. I mean, if you think about people avoiding care because they don't have the time to leave work to go to a physical therapist, whether it's for them or for anybody in their member, and we're saying within their family, and we're saying we will bring these solutions to you.
Exactly.
Absolutely, that has an ROI on it, let alone the downstream effect of physical therapy and surgery and so on. So you can absolutely connect the two. Another question we just got in the chat. The opioid crisis is big news. Employers seem hesitant to bridge the conversation of MSK and pain to substances abuse. Can you comment on how early interventions can help this conversation? And I think this is uh, this is a question that you and I have discussed in the past, specifically from the dimension of how important is early intervention and how much avoidance it can lead to. But wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, we need to keep people away from opioids. I mean, that's it. I mean, it's a painkiller. That's what it is. I mean, you think about, is it a vitamin or a painkiller? Well, it's literally the painkiller, right? So we want to go to the vitamins, and again, this idea of the care continuum. We need to look at these different factors, right? We talk about prevention at Worklete, right? We want to stop people from getting injured. If we can stop the incidence and severity of injury, again, people will get injured, but if we can even stop the severity, then when they, if they do get injured, they go to physical therapy. Again, we want to give them programs so it's easy for them to set themselves up to heal. PT sets people up to heal. If I'm setting myself up to heal, I'm going to have less pain, right? The big problem and a big component of the opioid crisis is that, people are taking these painkillers because they're continuing to have pain, right? They haven't healed correctly. Part of that, and I don't know what the direct incidence is, but part of that is probably because they either don't have access to physical therapy, right? Their employers have not, helped them or don't offer that. They're, don't have the money to do it themselves. They're not following the programs. But if we can democratize this idea of physical therapy, if we can make it cheaper, make it more accessible, make people engage with it more, they're going to set themselves up to heal. Hopefully, they're not going to take as many painkillers to deal with this pain. They're actually going to be dealing with it through exercise and physical therapy and all these different types of things. But then again, what we need to do after this is continue to think about, from a personalized level, why did this happen? And make sure people are starting to, again, even if they've had an injury, building those habits, continuing to maintain a good life and good habits so that they don't re-injure themselves. They're not back to that vicious cycle of having to take painkillers for an injury.
And I think that is where our two organizations are trying to get things accomplished. I want to know about an issue within a couple of days of it happening, as opposed to when it shows up in a claim, because once it shows up in a claim, there are downstream effects that are going to affect it. So our ability to intervene basically live as people start to experience the initial effects of these types of conditions is absolutely crucial.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole thing is, right. We've got, forward indicators for injury, and even a little bit of pain is a forward indicator for injury. Pain might not be an injury, or it might be at very early stages. If we can understand that, pull somebody out of work, start to give them that physical therapy in a very seamless process, we're going to catch that early. The worst thing you can do, right, is, and a lot of people just don't know their own bodies, is, oh, I got a little shoulder pain. It's okay. I'm going to work through it, right? No, unless you really know your own body, you do not want to do that. One of the things that we do in our application, and it's something that we've really innovated, again, kind of because we've been able to, leverage technology that's in people's hands is we have a daily check-in, right? And all the daily check-in says, have you been experiencing any new pain and injuries or injuries, right? And people can raise their hand. It's very, very impactful. And it's kind of, even though it seems so simple, it's innovative in these distributed workforces, because a lot of times, or historically, you need to actually go see your manager to say, hey, I'm experiencing injury. Maybe you're a truck driver that's on the road all the time. You don't see your manager often. Your manager doesn't have the opportunity to ask you. So being able to send something to somebody on a phone, right? They raise their hand, and and the manager, even if they're not next to them, can put them into the right process to deal with that. It becomes very impactful. If that process is great, a seamless transition to a care provider, to a digital PT program, and then I'm already doing what I need to do to decrease that pain, to not exacerbate that injury, boom, we're winning, right?
Yeah. And I think we can double down on that and say we could perhaps intervene even earlier in the cycle by teaching you better well-being habits, right?
Exactly.
So
Prevention.
let it monitor your posture without having to do too much, without a huge lift. Let us show you those better habits so that you don't proceed along that risk spectrum in any capacity.
And not only show you, those better postures, but let's teach you the underlying fundamentals, create those habits, so that you know why you need to be sitting up straight. You've created those habits, so you just do it innately. And then that's really when we start to win.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the rest of our questions. Ben, thank you so much again for all of your insights. We received a ton of feedback in the chat saying how great it was and how wonderful the content was. As I mentioned, we will following up with the recording of the session today. Feel free to share it with your colleagues or whomever you want to share it with. Our next session will be on September 8th, and it'll be focused on how we return to normal healthcare, both from a preventive and chronic conditions perspective. See you all then. Thank you for joining, and we hope it was a great use of your time.